welcome to this edition of Thursday at 4. This is a very special opportunity for us. We have a special guest, Amber Propert, who has been one of our very good audience members, who is now joining us as an attendee. Let me share my screen here. Patrons and our organizational members, especially our organizational member, Grant Thornton, who is the ALN Thursday at 4 sponsor for this month.
Grant Thornton for me was a slam dunk. I found the folks at Grant Thornton to be very approachable, collaborative.
Any successes I've had, some of it's because of the fact that I was given the flexibility and the resources to make it happen.
It motivates people to stay, to build upon the company and create success. And I wanted to join that company, and that's GT. That's Grant Thornton.
We're making these events available as podcasts for people who want to listen to the event again. Jim Dieter, CEO of the ALN, take it away.
Well, it's great to be with everyone again today. And it's great to have an opportunity to talk to Amber, who I remember when she first came to Washington from Ohio, I think it was, but we'll ask her in a minute. And she was like a little breath of fresh air. It's like, well, where'd she come from? Look, she's doing stuff. Wow, nice. So welcome, Amber. I hope you're having a good day and you're not too snowed in.
Well, thank you, Jim. No, we're doing great here.
Okay. Let's see, we're both in Northern Virginia, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's good. I am, at least.
No, I'm actually inside the belt. I live in Alexandria.
Ah, well, yeah. I'm out in Vienna. Although, as I was mentioning to Amber, people had all these impressive library pictures behind them. So I had to find an impressive library picture to put behind me. So I wish I had that many books. All right. Anyhow, Amber, we usually start, as you know, with an origin story of like, how'd you get into this, or how'd you get to where you are today? Maybe you could share a little bit of that with us today.
Well, sure. So believe it or not, I started out as a music major and I taught in public school for a while and just didn't really like it. So I went back to school, came out with an IT degree and started with the Defense Finance and Accounting Services in their IT division, which happened to house the Defense Property Accountability System.
Ah.
So I came in through it was a pseudo internship program, but I started off doing help desk support for a property management system for the government. Part of the internship program, you got to rotate through different positions. And after 6 or 12 months, they decided that I could go and work in the program office in DC for a 6-month stint. And while I was in DC working for the program office, they figured out that I could read and write. So I left the program as a technical person and transitioned into the greater part of the program office and took over policy writing, policy development. And that's where I really got involved with standards. NPMA really became part of my growth and development, because that's where my network really started to flourish. And from there, I've picked up acquisition experience. I have picked up the policy writing and audit experience, and that's kind of all culminated to where I am now.
And what's your job title now?
Well, the working title is that I am the logistics fire manager, fire being financial improvement and audit or remediation now. So and people might be familiar with the term fire if they've got experience with DoD. But what that means is all of the DoD issues that have been found by audit and relate to logistics are something that I can now directly work with to help correct. And I can work with all the different property types except for real property. So that is another like centralizing function that this new position has brought about that we previously didn't have. Before, we were still organized with one office to manage equipment policy and equipment issues, and another office manages supply chain. Another is dealing with transportation. We've got the CIO with the software, and just, everybody's got their little pockets of experts. So I have the opportunity to reach out to all the different pockets of experts, bring them together, and then try to put things into a cohesive and workable product that we can implement and remediate all of the audit findings that have been popping up. And there's only a few hundred, so it's just a little drop in the bucket.
Yeah, not that the audit findings aren't such a big deal, huh? Boy, must be some visibility then, right?
Oh yeah, a lot of visibility. One of the big programs in the department has congressional interest. I won't name names, but if you're familiar with Beltway politics, you can figure it out. And so I've been actually working directly with their program office to help them bring together all of the different pieces of, how are you managing your accountability here? Have you documented your business process? Do you have your roles and responsibilities defined? Where are your internal controls? How are you checking to make sure that your processes work? And this program has been around a while, but no one has taken the time to get into that level of detail and that support structure. So it's, the congressional interest gives us the inertia that we need.
Yeah.
All we could really ask for is just a couple extra bodies to help type things out or document a few extra things here and there. But we're really making tangible progress on getting our arms around such a big and complicated program, and making it into something where you can follow the bouncing ball and understand exactly where the tax dollars went, or knowing that the stuff on the shelves isn't going to expire before you can use it, or understanding who's got custody of what particular piece of equipment. So it's all really trying to come together.
Yeah. It always makes me think, when I'm thinking ISO 55000 and value from assets in support of organizational objectives, I always think DoD is, the perfect example of, there is a real connection between here's all the stuff we got and here's what we need to do and here's kind of how it all works. Does it feel like that at all from where you sit?
Some days yes, and some days no. When it really you get to see people and their light bulbs go off, that's when okay, they understand like how the portfolio works here, or that's where they understand that the data coming out of that branch over there can support this branch over here, and they really put that together. But sometimes it's really challenging getting people to the light bulb moment so that they can understand how everything works together and just really supports that overall organic entity.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about, I know you've been involved in, standards efforts to varying degrees. Can you talk about how that might have influenced what you've done over your time at OSD?
Well, I would say that being involved with standards and standards development helps you in understanding multiple points of view. You get to hear from other government entities, you get to hear from corporations. Sometimes it's entirely different fields entirely. So, you kind of get stuck here in talking to the defense contractors and the defense entities, because that's just the little tiny world that we normally operate in.
Mhm.
But when you get into the standards themselves, you can see the fundamental issues that really stick to whichever business you're actually in, and then how everybody interprets all the different standards, like having a half an hour discussion on the definition of asset is nothing when you're in a group talking about developing standards. Asset means, X, Y, and Z. To banks, an asset is the physical money that they keep in their vaults, or just, all these different things. Intellectual property, that's an asset. And how do you craft a standard to address a process or an issue and use the words that mean enough to make everybody participating agree? They may not like it, but they'll agree to it. That's another thing. You can't go for where everybody's happy. You have to go where everybody's satisfied.
Yeah, yeah. And that, in the development of 55,000, there was a lot of blood shed along the way. But I do think we ended up with a document that wasn't a lowest common denominator, but that reflected, the best thinking from around the world. Some of the rough edges knocked off as we bumped our heads together and things like that. You think there's any prospects in the foreseeable future around 55,000 in DoD?
I think that when we get our arms around nailing down our process maps and our internal controls, then it'll be a very short leap from taking that world of knowledge and applying the 55,000 to it and saying, look how it already dovetails. We've already taken all of our hard work and we've identified our controls, and we've looked at where our risks are, and we're doing things to try to mitigate the risks. Then you can show them just exactly how that standard supports the effort. So we're doing ISO 55,000 without calling it ISO 55,000. Like, we're going through the pains that you need in terms of documentation and in terms of supporting your entire enterprise and looking at that whole picture. Then once you get to that product, I think it'll be very easy to just say, hey, look at this great document. Look how we're already going along.
Mm-hmm.
Can we enhance anything by applying this standard on top of it?
Yeah, no, that's good. One of the interesting things about the standard is that, my own analysis and the way I've used it in some working with some companies, is that there's really not that many of those 170 or whatever shall statements in 55,001. There's not that many of them that are unique to an asset management system. Like you say, it's documentation, it's risk management. Just like, think of the 177 shall statements, 24 of them are, did you document that? Well, if you're documenting everything, you got a lot of boxes checked. And then there's, an asset management piece on top of that. And obviously you're doing lots and lots of asset management. It sounds like getting more and more stakeholders involved. That the system part of it, I think I'd agree. When you get to, putting all the pieces together, you should have an easy path there. Especially given your background in the information part of it, that's a great place to come into it.
Yeah, and matter of fact, our logistics standards group, the Enterprise Business Standards Organization, is undergoing a heavy duty reform effort to modernize all of their logistics standards, update, the data dictionaries. And I've been able to connect them with the chief data officer over in the chief information officer division. And the chief data officer guys were ready to reinvent the wheel. So we're like, hey, no. Look, these guys are trying to do the same sort of things that you are. Just try to work parallel and you can get a lot farther.
Yeah, that's good. So what's kind of the, to the extent you can share, what's your hot topics now? What are the things that are getting people's attention, or that, people that are, heavily involved as government contractors or federal agencies, et cetera? What's their issue with you? What makes your phone?
Well, mainly it's the program that I referred to earlier. They are very much high visibility kind of an effort. But a lot of the other things that I've really been trying to do is connect the people who are working on efforts that really are complementary to each other. So that way, as they are trying to improve things, they're not working against each other or duplicating efforts. One of the really great things that's happening right now is each of the services are going through a systems reform effort where they're trying to consolidate into a core set of systems. So consider going from 150 or 200 systems across a military service down to a core 30 or 40 that accomplish all of the same mission necessities that they needed to do.
Yeah.
That is a great time to also modernize, check out your business processes, look for improvements. I mean, the way we operate is so heavily dependent on systems and system capabilities. Without going through the effort to really examine what's going on your technology side, it's very hard to implement real and lasting changes on your personnel side. But right now, since they're going through that effort, they are taking the time that they need to bring in a business process reform angle to the whole works as they're going through the effort and really cutting back on their systems. And I imagine this is going to be a great cost savings for everyone too. Maintaining a high quantity of systems is never really a cheap solution, but getting down to a core set of, no kidding, systems is really going to be a financial win just on our expenditures.
Yeah. I remember my good friend Fred Seth. I don't know if you know Fred, but he claims to be retired now, and I guess he is, over in Delaware. But he was, when I was a young hippie, he was in Vietnam, and he was in supply in the Marines, and did really, really well there. But he said in Vietnam, they had two kinds of records, asset records and consumable or material records. And the only difference was the asset records they wrote in ink, and the material records
they wrote in pencil. Oh yeah.
But he also had stories of he'd get a simple question as he rose up in the ranks. It'd be like, how many tanks do we have? And it was like it took him months to find an answer. So I think that probably goes to the kind of questions you're trying to answer.
Oh yeah, very much so. Recently we have been implementing a business intelligence system, and we're feeding all sorts of data into this BI system. One of the things that we intend to use it for is to answer questions like, how many tanks do we have? Because it's when it's really a major critical issue, do you want to spend a couple of days getting the answer, or do you want to spend 10 or 15 minutes getting the answer?
Yeah, right.
And that was really apparent when we did some medical supply research. We were looking for COVID personal protective equipment and masks, the N95 masks, or just other medical supplies that could be used to support all of the remediation efforts. So it took quite a lot of time to get our arms around all of the information on what do we have at our medical stores, what do we have in the warehouses, and bring that together. And it just drives the importance of being able to access quality data about what you have when you need it the most.
Let me ask one, not a pie in the sky question, but what do you see in the future in this realm? Maybe not if you had every wish you could wish for, what it would be, but what do you think are some possible outcomes in the future that are, will help better support the DoD mission?
Well, I think that if they really embrace the reform effort with improving their processes along with improving their systems, that it's going to go a very long way in supporting our overall mission. And of course, coming from the Defense Department, job number one is keeping people safe. So we want to get to the point where we can do predictive maintenance. We want to really get on the forward edge of maintaining our equipment, being able to understand the best trade-offs when we need to do an emergency overhaul to a ship, and where can we bring funds over to do that overhaul without really sacrificing something major somewhere else. We're building to the point where we could be able to do that kind of analysis and really get into where the assets impact us the most, and what are the risks and what are the trade-offs, and really be a lot better at doing our support mission as well as our operational mission.
Is there any kind of a standard approach to criticality analysis, or is that generally done, or only in certain places?
Everybody's got their own approach right now. If we're successful in implementing some enterprise risk management systems, then the systems will drive some standardization in how people assess the risks, because there'll be a set amount of criteria to help them decide where they want to put the most emphasis, and to just gauge how big of a risk a particular issue might be. With us being as unwieldy in size as we are, then I could see that as being a forcing function to bring in the standardization and help everybody look at the issues in a similar fashion.
Yeah. It's I don't know if you have a number, but I always think that DoD must have more assets than any other organization in the world. Do you have any idea? Do you have any kind of a concept of a number on that?
The last time I looked, I had an acquisition value. This is a couple of years ago. So the depreciated value was somewhere around $800 billion in just general property, plant, and equipment. So that wasn't counting things that might be classified as inventory or operating materials and supplies. And believe it or not, missiles are operating materials and supplies, financially speaking. So that 800 billion doesn't count any missiles.
Yeah, that's remarkable. Nice, nice. Well, Mike, I've seen a lot of questions come up.
Yeah, the first one is, how many missiles do you have? But no, that was a joke. But I'm sure there's a lot.
Enough. I have
Yeah.
enough to do the job.
Good, good, good. That's the answer we wanted.
It's good.
So the first question goes back to when you were speaking earlier about internal controls and all the ISO 55000 activities you're doing without calling it ISO 55000. Are you yourself using ISO 55000 as a guide in any way, or is it just common sense activity, business activity?
It's a little of both. When I have time to go back to the 55,000 and really look in, refresh my memory about things that I could incorporate, it's always helpful. But then there's also just the common sense approach. This is stuff that we should be doing, but that's also the beauty of the 55,000. There is a lot of common sense in the 55,000.
I was on a webinar with some people from Australia that Jack Kelly actually got me connected with, although it was a couple of old friends. And they're going to suggest when the work on the revision of 55,000, that there's the 4 principles, that a 5th principle be added called adaptability. And just right away, that seemed to make a lot of sense to me, to be able to just react and change going forward.
That sounds like our pie in the sky goal.
So since we have so many questions, Amber, can I ask you to stay after class and answer those?
Sure, I can stick around for a little bit longer.
Okay, so I am going to share my screen and thank our members again. And then also let everybody know that next week, we'll be talking with Jennifer Terzi from ASTM. Now we'll just continue with the questions here. To what degree do you look at external stakeholders and end users in what you are doing now?
Well, we have a lot of external stakeholders and a lot of end users also. I guess part of it is, what part of the business are we focusing on? Sometimes it's very much an internal process where the end users are people, doing the day-to-day job and really just providing that active feedback of, hey, we've been trying to execute this and we just can't do it. Or we get the feedback of the process is right and the control is failing because nobody's doing the control. So, that would be where our end users really come into play. Then external stakeholders, Congress tells us what they want all the time. So, they're an active participant in what we do, whether we want them to be or not. But we also are cognizant of how what we do trickles out. One of the things that I remember Congress put into one of the Defense Authorization Acts was that they wanted defense contractors to do their independent audits, and then we would try to use their independent audits as a way of supporting our overall DoD audits. And that sounds great in theory, but when you talk to the people who are performing our audits, they're like, okay, that's great, but we still have to do this kind of testing or this kind of testing because those auditors didn't look at these areas or those areas. So it gets complicated pretty fast.
But it sounds like you are understanding your layers of that. You're not a mom and pop shop where it's easy to identify the stakeholders. There's a lot going on and you sound like you're juggling those balls.
Yes.
Very good. We have a question about audit remediation is a great time to do this when you were listing all the things that you're doing. Will there be some form of assessment in place of a formal ISO certification?
I think our first goal is to get a decent audit opinion.
Yeah.
And then after we get a decent audit opinion, we can start entertaining something like a formal certification. Even if we did attempt a formal certification, it would likely be at the entity levels. So each agency would have to look at, getting their little niche of the DoD in a certification state. So I can't imagine us as the DoD being an ISO 55000 certified organization, but I can see, the Defense Information Systems Agency going after a certification, and then the Missile Defense Agency going after a certification, because they're really in charge of their own little piece of the department. And pursuit of certification, I think, would be at that particular level in the DoD.
Makes perfect sense.
Is there, when I first got involved in ISO standards, I worked for a government contractor and got involved in their ISO 9000 effort. And that entirely happened because we were a NASA contractor at that time. NASA said, you need to be 9001 certified, within 6 months after winning this contract. Is that kind of a thought on anybody's radar at DoD?
No, that's a good 7 years probably out.
Okay.
Like I said, getting through a place where we can get an audit opinion is going to be a major health indicator for us. And then we can move forward with looking at ISO 9000, ISO 55000, or any other certification that might be out there to just give that sense of goodness to the processes.
Yeah.
So Alex Baron-Blitt from NPMA and LMI asks, do you see the opportunity to shape new normal post-COVID with more permanent remote working, reduction in real property footprint, and therefore change in personal property for DoD and non-soldier sailor airman workforce?
Yeah, that's also a culture change. It could happen now that we've been operationalized in a way that most of our workforce is teleworking, and it's mostly successful. We could try to start reducing our footprint, but we're still going to have the warehouses of stuff. We're still going to need that big support network for the information technology. Maybe we'll cut down on desks, and maybe we could get to the point where we do the GSA model, where GSA has the phones through the computers, and they rotate into office spaces, and they sign up for meeting rooms, so which is how they operated before the pandemic. So it's always a possibility. Cutting back on our leased spaces would certainly aid in all sorts of efforts. So it's just a matter of making sure that the people who are in charge still feel like the job is getting done. And sometimes that's a tough sell. They're still very, we want to see you, make sure that things are operating the way they should be. The flip side of that is you have to work a lot harder to have the hallway conversations that really help with moving a mission forward. So once people really figure out how to manage in those hallway type conversations in a virtual environment, I think even more will be able to stay in a virtual or remote work setup.
That's excellent. That answers the question. So he is appreciative of that. And that's what the Asset Leadership Network is trying to figure out, how to assist groups to do that informally And once you learn to do it informally, maybe you can formalize it in your organization. So, and then our board member and senior fellow, Rich Culbertson, asks, how has the item unique identification registry played through the audit, and how will it help in the future as an internal control backbone of managing assets?
Good old IUID. The way it will be, really useful is, just making sure that it gets implemented properly. And this goes back to the controls. Have we documented our processes? Is IUID part of the process? Did we document how we're using the registry itself to perform as a control or a risk mitigation factor? And have we shown that this is how system to system interoperability is happening? So when it comes to the registry, I really think that its future is going to depend on how we show that it is integral into our overall processes. We really need to show that when we're looking at government furnished property, this is a resource that we can use to help supplement our property records, or this is a resource where we can say, okay, hey, auditor, here's where we have a bunch of information that you can use in validating that we shipped our item to Timbuktu or wherever we shipped it to. So it really is going to come down to documenting where it fits, how it fits, and then backing it up with, and this is how we're using it.
Excellent. Sounds like you're doing that from all the things you described earlier.
Working hard to.
So I knew this was going to be a very special program, and indeed it is. There are more people on now at the end than at any other time. And usually there's a build up and a tail off, but everybody has stuck around and found you that interesting, and people have telling their friends to come and join because the number's gone up. So thank you. I will let you and Jim have the final goodbyes.
Well, Amber, thank you so much for coming on. It's I've always, it was part of the motivation of Thursday at 4 was not getting to have those kind of hallway conversations, especially people from different organizations that we often saw at our ALN in-person events and NPMA events and other events. And you were one of the people that I always enjoyed talking to see what you were up to and what was going on and what new and exciting things you had to talk about. So thank you very much for sharing all that great information today. Really impressive.
Thank you for inviting me. I always appreciate the invitation to be included and really just being able to connect with everybody. You're exactly right. It's so hard to maintain a connection these days, and I'm very happy to participate. And anytime in the future, just call me up and I'll clear off some white space for you.
Okay. Sounds good. Well, we appreciate you doing that for us today. And thanks to Mike and Mark Giuliani, who's doing our technical background today. We missed Nick because he's not here today, but I guess he'll be back next week. And thank you for everyone for participating. And tell your friends and come back next week when we have Jennifer Tercey from ASTM. And then we'll soon be announcing some people for the March events. So thanks a lot and have a great day. Thanks, Mike.
Bye, everyone.